Welcome to the Recess Life Podcast. This is the place where we explore play and what it means to get back to your inner child. I'm Louise, your host. Join me as I chat with teachers, entrepreneurs, artists, and thought leaders about how we can live a life of more play and impact. Let's get it started. Hello, everyone. It is the first week back from the holiday in 2020. I don't know about you, but this week hit me like a ton of bricks. Maybe it's because we had 2 weeks off for the holiday, but this past week has been a little crazy. It felt like everyone woke up from a slumber and just got right back into the swing of life. So I've been working nonstop. I work from home, so I haven't left my house pretty much in 2 days straight. I did leave a couple times to go to the gym, to take a movement class that I've been taking. And I also went and visited my neighbor's puppy. Such a cute little thing. His name's Junior. But that's it. I hope that your first week back from the holidays a little more balanced than mine feels. And it's actually really fitting that we have today's guest for the podcast. I'm so glad that I was able to listen back on his podcast this week because it was such a good reminder as things feel very crazy right now. My guest today is Charlie Hoehn. He is an author, he's a marketer, he's the head of video at a company called Scribe, which helps authors get their books out into the world. He wrote a book called Play It Away and Play for a Living. Play It Away, he talks about how he cured his anxiety through play. And a lot of that anxiety was brought on by workaholism. And at one point, he worked for Tim Ferris. Yes, the Tim Ferris, author of 4 Hour Work Week, 4 Hour Body, among many other really well-known books. And for a time, Charlie was Tim's right-hand guy, but got extremely burnt out and came down with bouts of anxiety because of how much he was working and how stressed out he was. And he tried everything. And the only thing that cured him was play. So this is such a good reminder because sometimes I can tend to fall into workaholic patterns, like these past 2 days of just sitting in my house mainly and working straight. And I have to remind myself to take breaks. I have to really conscientiously go to the gym and do the things that I love to do. One funny thing that I have started doing over the break, I started learning about TikTok. Yes, this new social media app that everyone is using, mainly a lot of the younger kids. It's funny, I'm going to listen back on this podcast in 10 years and hear me talk about TikTok like it's this newfangled thing. And it'll probably be old news even in just a couple of years. But for now, TikTok is this new exciting thing. And I learned how to use TikTok over the break, just for fun, really. And it's such a fun app. There's a lot of kids and people on there that are using it to learn dances and to connect and duet with each other, where you can create a video side by side with someone. And I love it. I dance, so I love it myself. And I've used the app to learn how to do dances, and I've just been so entertained by it. So actually today I took a break and decided I would learn a TikTok dance for just 15 minutes to a half hour while I needed to just take a break from work. And it was great. All it was just 15 to 30 minutes of just getting out of my stressed out space that I've been in for 2 days straight. So anyway, that's just a little segue to just say that it's so important to connect back to ourselves. There's always going to be not enough time. There's always going to be a reason that it's okay to not connect with yourself or to not play. But don't make those excuses. Always find a way to get back to yourself. Always find a reason to play. And trust me, you're going to be so happy that you did. And you're going to feel so much more like yourself once you get back to work. So in today's episode, we talk about how Charlie got back to himself and how he found himself again through play. There was a time when he was living with this anxiety for weeks on end, and he didn't see an end in sight, and he tried everything under the sun he thought he could do to cure his anxiety, and nothing worked but play. So I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. I hope it reminds you that while it's all good to work and to love your work even, and bonus if work feels like play to you, but it's also really important to have a life outside of work also. Your friends, your family, your other hobbies. There's so much more to life than work, and I hope that Charlie will be able to remind you of that. Enjoy this conversation and make sure you stay until the end, where I'll recap the little nuggets of wisdom that we learned from the conversation. Enjoy. Hi everyone. Today we have Charlie Hoehn on the Recess Life podcast. Charlie has worked with a number of well-known authors: Ramit Sethi, Gary Vaynerchuk, Seth Godin, and Tim Ferris, of course. And he's known for his playful approach to work and his books, Play It Away and Play for a Living. He lives in Colorado with his wife and daughter. I am from Colorado myself, so super excited to be chatting with Charlie today. How are you doing today, Charlie?
Doing great. Thank you for having me, Louise. I was just saying before we started recording, I think it's awesome that you're doing this as a project, and wouldn't be on here actually if I didn't believe in the work you're doing. So thanks for doing it.
Oh, so appreciate that. And so, like I mentioned, you wrote two books. I actually maybe more than that. Play It Away and Play for a Living. And do you have another book on play that I'm forgetting?
I always say I've written 5 books and 3 of them were good. So Play It Away, Play for a Living, and then my first book I wrote was Recession Proof Graduate, and that was back in 2009.
Okay, fantastic. But you were not always the playful person that you are today. You've learned a lot to get here, and let's back up a little bit to talk about your backstory of how you became such an advocate for play. Tell us about your story of landing on discovering play for yourself in this phase of your life.
Yeah, so I had to learn the really hard way, because for a long time, for a few years, I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was getting sick and dying, and I didn't know what these sensations were. It was really frightening. It felt like I was on the verge of having a heart attack. This was in 2012, 2013, and no one back then was talking about anxiety, at least that I knew. I wasn't familiar with it. And so when I was having panic attacks, when my hands would shake so much that I couldn't even hold a cup of water without spilling, when I was suddenly found myself scared of people, even friends, like just feeling wildly uncomfortable and locking myself in my apartment because I didn't want them to catch this weird energy. When I found myself finally confessing to my girlfriend at the time, who had said to me, "Charlie, what happened to you? Like, you're not the man that I met all those months ago." And I finally just said, "I feel dead inside all the time, and I have no idea how to fix it." And I remember she started crying, and I felt jealous that she could cry because I just felt empty.
You were numb.
And I was numb. I'm just desperate to get myself out. And, I visited doctors who'd offered me anti-anxiety meds, and I tried meditation, therapy, journaling, every supplement you can buy in Whole Foods, flotation tanks, healers, different forms of exercise, different diets. I did a 9-day fast where I just drank water. I did prayer, volunteering, like even took a 6-week course specifically designed for men struggling with anxiety, and, did psychedelics before that. That's like a thing now, but like back then it wasn't, or at least it wasn't kind of running around in these circles that we're in. Mm-hmm. But I was really frustrated because at the end of all that experimentation, nothing really worked. I was still stuck. And that was kind of when things felt the darkest. Yeah. And the reason I got on Play is because I just happened to stumble upon the book Play by Dr. Stuart Brown, which talks about the evolutionary reasons that we play. Why do humans play? I mean, it's a similar answer to why do we sleep 8 hours a night if that's such a huge chunk of the day and it puts us in a vulnerable position. Why do we need to sleep? Well, it's because we need to survive. That's how we function and get through life, is by recharging. And play has a similar dynamic, except play is like this superfood of human behavior, where play allows you to learn skills, play allows you to form empathy, like the building block of being a human being. Play allows you to form relationships with others. And most importantly, play allows you to de-stress. It allows you to decompress from this buildup of pressure that's so common in our modern lifestyle. And so I read a couple quotes in that book that changed my thinking around the problem, one of which was a lack of play should be treated like malnutrition. It's a health risk to your body and mind. So that was one. Yeah. And then another was the opposite of play isn't work, it's depression. And both of those kind of gave me this insight. And I remember laughing when I read the book because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so obvious. I grew up being very playful. I got into these jobs that I love because I was playful about it, and I was trying to create this game that I could play. And then it became very serious and structured and rigid and all about productivity and future planning and strategy. And like, I stopped being present.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think created that? So going from being playful to your life to going into this anxiety-ridden existence that you were living, how do you think that switch happened? How did it even flip if play is so natural to us?
It's challenging to answer and give a singular answer because I know it was a number of things, but I think one of the main ones was reinforcement, positive reinforcement. You get rewarded for doing that kind of work and getting these kinds of results and planning out for the future and always being in that mode. You do not get positively reinforced for going off and screwing around and, playing sports for a few hours with your buddies. And so, especially in San Francisco, where you are, it is a workaholic culture where everyone's hustling and grinding and trying to make, the next $1 billion thing. And they're all meeting up with each other in cafes to talk about how impressive they are with each other. And so, and I'm not saying they do that and I didn't, I totally did that. And I fell into that. And so I think that was the biggest thing, was like how much I was getting positively and reinforced both for myself and from others. Like I remember that event that I took part in, the Opening the Kimono, which was Tim Ferris's big book marketing publishing seminar that he did. I planned the vast majority of that, and I'm not an event planner like you, so it was super stressful. But I remember at the end, I had worked harder than I had ever had in my life and had secretly taken drugs to keep me awake for days at a time. And the entire room stood up and applauded me. So it's like
Yeah.
you get that kind of recognition just for being a person behind the scenes. Like
Right.
you get people I had people saying to me, like, how do I get my Charlie?
That validation felt good. You said,
yeah,
I'm
it's
doing
like,
something
wow,
right.
I'm doing this. I'm really a linchpin in these people's lives, and like they need me, and I'm valued, and I'm worthy, and blah blah blah. So it's a trap I fell into.
Yeah.
Willingly.
And as an event producer, at some parts of my life, I have run events where I was completely burnt out. And at the same time, there was this sense of validation of thinking of myself as the person that can make or break an event and save the event. And I'm the one that has all the power, and something about that feels so validating. But it sometimes takes getting to a point of realizing bigger things are at stake if you don't dial back, or if you don't take care of yourself. And it sounds like you got to that point.
Your life.
Right. Exactly.
Literally, whether you live or die.
And unfortunately, as humans, we sometimes don't change until we experience pain that is unbearable. So you got to that point.
It's Dave Ramsey says, you got to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. It's the pain of staying the same has to be greater than the pain of change, because we resist change. We do not want to have change. No,
because the pain becomes familiar, and we think, well, at least we know what this is like, so it's easier to stay in it. But so you got to that point where you were burnt out. You produced this event that was very successful. On the surface, on the outside, it seemed like, oh, this is great. I'm successful. But you started to experience this anxiety that you talked about in the beginning, and you realized you had to make a change. First of all, let's talk about what was a day like, a typical day when you were experiencing this anxiety-filled life before you realized.
Well, I'll say that it took a while before I realized I needed to make a change. It was just me. So I had a number of events that registered, I believe, as traumas too, which kind of amplified it. So if you've been running on adrenaline and in fight or flight mode for months at a time, willingly, by the way, drinking 6 cups of coffee a day, working from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m., like, yeah, I mean, I put myself in that. I didn't take great care of myself. And then family member died, close friend attempted suicide. And then the work that Tim and I were doing, the deadline for the book that we were about to work on got pushed out 6 months. And I just realized, like, I'm going to crash and burn. I took 10 days off to just kind of gather my thoughts and figure out, like, what needs to happen. And I just didn't, in retrospect, I could have probably had a much more vulnerable and honest conversation with Tim. But just given the nature of publishing and the book deal and everything, I was like, I gotta quit. Like, I can't do this. And I feel like I'm falling apart. And so that's what happened. And quitting your job in one of the most expensive cities in the United States, where you're like dipping into retirement funds and everything just to pay rent. Because I mean, I got multiple dream job offers after that I had to turn down because it was still like, I'm a mess. So every day was me just in my apartment, kind of spinning my wheels and feeling like I was going crazy, feeling just both exhausted and horribly guilty that I wasn't being productive. I was just a mess.
Yeah.
There's no other
Aimless.
way to put it. And like, no one really knew. I think friends of mine may have suspected, like, oh, Charlie's going through something. But I've talked to my best friend about this many times, and he was like, I had no idea. Like, none of us knew. And so when I published Play It Away, I had a number of friends be like, man, I'm so sorry. Like, I wish I'd known. And And I was like, I didn't really know what it was either. And I was ashamed of it because, life's supposed to be perfect on paper, and it was not. So,
yep. You probably didn't know how to talk about it fully, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I can imagine just the conflicting feelings you were feeling of, I had this dream job and so many people would have been jealous of it. I must not be enough to keep up with what it required. And there's no path now. What do I do next? And I just can't imagine. And yes, living in San Francisco where there's a lot of pressure to succeed and there's a certain image that comes with being successful in San Francisco. So that I know that very well. So
you reminded me of something, Louise, is the paranoia. I thought I burned a bridge with Tim, and that everything was over. All this stuff that I built, and here I am in my mid-20s, and I'm like, what have I done? There's no recovering from this. And I'll say, Tim was very compassionate. In understanding, though he still didn't fully understand why, because I just wasn't open about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was a necessary phase of my life to go through to get to where I am now, but it was not pleasant. It felt very challenging.
And looking back now, do you think there was a way you could have done just as good of a job at Opening the Kimono and working in all the jobs that you did without that crash and burn that you experienced?
So, yes, but I'll preface it by saying my quote unquote assistant, the person who was helping me with the event, was the former event planner for Apple's WWDC. She used to she worked with Steve Jobs to launch the iPhone. She was his right-hand woman. And so I had good help, but if I'd been a bit more intelligent and capable of managing other people, had I known what I had gotten myself into, I would have hired somebody like yourself, or I would have said, and I don't even think the hotel offered to do this, so I don't even know if it was possible, but I probably would have said to the hotel, look, you guys do events all the time. What are the things that are going to break me? You do those things. Let me focus on, I would have delegated more, basically. I thought I delegated enough because I had such an amazing woman helping me, but I did not.
It was information you didn't know for sure, and maybe a sense of I need to be the one, no one else can, and feeling the need maybe to keep that control a little bit. If that's is that fair?
Common mistake among entrepreneurs is when you're really capable at a few things, you believe you're capable at everything. And event planning, nothing has humbled me faster than that. So.
Yeah, and I asked that question because I think workaholism as a concept, I wonder how much of it is self-induced upon ourselves versus what is forced upon us from outside players, whether that be society, culture, bosses, colleagues. And I know everyone's scenario is different, but I tend to wonder when I see my sister who works for a very well-known startup here in San Francisco, she'll be working late, then come home and work longer and say, oh, I have so much longer to work. And I say, is that actually true? Or is this something you're creating in your mind? And how much of that time are you zoning out, just looking at things because you're so tired? And it's hard to have that conversation when someone's so in it. But I wonder, as just a society and culture, how much of this are we taking upon ourselves?
So let's talk about this for a second, because it is important and it does matter. And I'll tell you personally, at our company, Scribe, there were a number of people there younger than myself who I would leave, and we had a security camera set up at the time, and I would see them on the security camera at 10 p.m. And so I had a conversation with 3 of them one day, and I said, guys, unsustainable and unacceptable.
Yeah.
Like,
and unnecessary.
And take it from me, I had to write a book about what happens when you do this too many times. And so you guys need to hold each other accountable to it. And so they created like the Slack channel, Life Outside Work, and they would celebrate each other when they would do things outside of work, because you do have to have a life, not just work. But you talked about, like, you wonder what are the core roots of workaholism. From everything I've read, there's a number of things, right? So first off, basically only achievers become workaholics, right? Like type A driven firstborns who were they got tons of attention every time they achieved. For many of them, they grew up where they received love when they got an achievement done. And so life didn't necessarily feel like a playground to them. It felt like a proving ground. You prove yourself, you get love. Mm-hmm. When they get into the working world, there is this core fear there of, am I still worthy of love? And if I don't put in the hours, if I don't do work, I will get fired or I will be rejected.
Yeah.
Right. So there's often that going on, but that does not absolve the companies from taking advantage of these dynamics and working people all around the clock. And it does not absolve leadership either of being those people too. Like, they don't set the example. You think everyone else is just going to like take care of themselves if you're not taking care of yourself? No.
Right.
So there's poor leadership in self-care, and companies, frankly, there are a lot of, especially in startup world where it's the norm, taking advantage of young people in their need to belong. And it's not a good situation for a lot of people's health. And these companies are shortchanging themselves. That's the bigger thing. Like, they care about profit and productivity.
Yep.
If you want productivity, add recess into their days. If you want profit, just force them to work less. Like, there's multiple case studies of companies where they work way less and get more money, get more done.
I think to your point, there's a kind of a couple things going on around that are both internal and external in our culture. There's not good examples in the workplace and in leadership around balance and self-care and play, and sort of this need and this sort of attachment to external rewards and validation. But then there's also the internal stuff that's going on with individuals around this underlying message that we're getting around your worth and your value is what you can produce and what you can do for others. So I think there's a lot going on, but externally and internally in our culture.
And you think about, like, what other species do we hold this standard to? Mm-hmm. Like, you're not actually, that's not true. We hold plants to this standard, right? Like, we grow crops and we expect them to produce all the time, and we manipulate them in such a way that they'll grow all the time. Same with other animals that we eat, So I think it's a really unfortunate mindset we have where it's like maximal production, optimal. I don't know if it's the result of being so focused on numbers, translating everything to numbers and just seeing how high you can make that number go.
Yeah.
But it probably is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we value what we can measure, and that there's all about measuring and data, but things like self-care and someone's well-being and a healthy person, healthy society, those are a little harder to measure. So right. We don't measure that. No one's measuring. And this is what drives me. I've always wanted to
to measure laughter, actually, because the statistic of kids laugh like hundreds of times a day, adults laugh like an average of three. It's like, well, why aren't we tracking laughter? Clearly, someone's tracking laughter. Why don't we have a device that tracks that? But no, yeah, like you can't measure. I made a video recently that I brought our CEO to tears. Like he was just really touched by it. I'm not tracking the number of tears I'm getting out of people, but like that is a measure of the effectiveness of my job. So it's all these intangibles that are really the things that matter.
So when you got to that point where you realized something had to change in your life and you stumbled upon Stuart Brown's book, which is a great book that everyone should read, how did you start to make those shifts in your life? Were they gradual? Was it overnight? And how did those changes happen?
So it was initially, I was just kind of testing things. So then I remember the day after I read that book, someone reached out to me and asked me to have a coffee meeting. And I said, why don't we go play catch at the park instead? And he was super enthusiastic. And that's a recommendation I make to people. And a guy named James Altucher, he told me recently that he now does all his meetings as like recess meetings, like just doing fun activities together. I've had salespeople tell me that they have been in weddings of clients because they switched their meetings to recess meetings.
Cool.
So it's like one of the easiest switches you can make to your existing schedule that will enrich it and make it so much better. So I started doing that, and I would come back to my work for the first time feeling like this levity, this lightness that I hadn't felt in a while. So I could feel the stress level going down and my joy going up. And I just was like, all right, I'll just keep double downing on this until it stops working. And so I signed up I started playing catch every day. I started playing home run derbies on the weekends with a buddy of mine, and I started signing up for group sports, and then I signed up for improv comedy classes, and that was the thing that like really just set me on hyperdrive, because improv comedy, which sounds absolutely like a nightmare to someone with anxiety or depression, it is the practice of play. It is the closest thing to true play that adults can formally do and get together on a regular basis for extended periods, where there's really no agenda. There's no outcome you're going for except to be silly and to laugh. And it's not right for everybody. Like not everybody had that style of play growing up, or everybody has a different play personality, right? So I've had friends who are like, improv didn't work for me, but Brazilian jiu-jitsu, oh man, like I used to wrestle all the time growing up, rough and tumble, like totally dissolved my symptoms. For me, I was super into improv when I was a kid. I would come up with characters, I would do sketches, like I loved it. And so it was like revisiting my childlike self. It was practicing being playful. And within less than a month, all of my symptoms of anxiety went away. And I didn't mention this. I always forget to mention it. I was smoking like a pack or two of cigarettes a day for a while, like during this period, because to me, I was like, this is the gentleman's suicide. This is the like, I want to speed life up. And so, oh
my goodness.
Like, I haven't smoked a cigarette in 6-7 years, and it wasn't like a conscious effort of I have to quit. It was just everything just dissolved away, and so wow. That's what happened.
Oh my gosh! In a matter of a month, did you deal with any guilt in trying all these new activities and adding them to your life, because they seemingly didn't have an output, quote unquote, right? So did you deal with any guilt during that process of adding play into your life?
I've been through enough, and Well, the output was getting back to my old self. Like I knew what it felt like to feel good and to like myself and to
Yeah.
like my life and to enjoy it. And that was what I was going for. And I got there. And I didn't feel any guilt because it was like this is like medicine. This is my medicine. And so, in sharing this story, I met somebody who had stage 4 cancer who went into total remission, and the only treatment they gave themselves was watching comedy every single day for hours.
You're kidding.
They laughed their way back to health. There have been so many case studies I've come across, both from readers of mine and people who just discovered it as well on their own, that just reintroducing play as a mindset and an activity where you get to just de-stress. Your body is suddenly sending the signal to you that, hey, everything's calm, everything's joyful, everything's good. And so your brain starts to believe what your body is telling you. Like the number of people who've been gotten off of high dose anxiety meds for 2 decades were able to get off of them. People who didn't commit suicide. I mean, it works. It works. And
yeah. And anyone can do it.
Really, it's really simple, and all you need is permission to see moments as opportunities to have fun rather than moments to be more successful.
Right. When I talk to people around what does their life look like, and I find that it's so interesting as we get older that we tend to fall into 2 camps of how we spend our time. There is the external and extrinsically rewarding activities. So that's work, that's paying bills, that's doing everything we're supposed to do because we're adults and we have to. And those things are not bad. They're part of life. But then there is the other camp of, I don't even know what to call it, but they're the passive activities where when we zone out because we're feeling tired and we need to unplug, and we go on Instagram and we watch Netflix and zone out to TV or BuzzFeed or whatever. But the thing that tends to fall away is the internally motivated, the intrinsically motivated things. And those are the things that we did when we were a kid. And I'm not saying get rid of the externally motivating or the passive activities, but maybe shuffle your time around, maybe have a different balance, and you may experience something different with your life. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Everything kind of depends on your intention in your consciousness in which you're going into it, right? Like one person can eat a meal to experience life more fully, and another person can eat a meal to experience life less, to numb out. And everything's very addictive now. But in knowing that, like, addiction only surfaces when we're alone. It only happens when we're like not connecting with each other, when we don't have community. Wow.
And so if you're struggling with that stuff, like the easiest way to curb it and do it with a higher degree of consciousness is like, how can I do this activity to connect deeper to somebody I care about?
Wow. I guess I never thought of the idea that, addiction happens when we're alone. It doesn't happen when we're in community and when we're connected. That's a big eye opener. Wow.
It's the truth.
It is.
It is the truth.
It is the truth. So once your anxiety was able to dissolve the way it did, how did your work look from that point forward? Was there any tendencies to fall back into that workaholic nature? What did work look like from that point forward?
Work looked a lot better. My work became stronger. Honestly, some of my work was really just garbage during that period of anxiety. Like, it was nonsense. For one thing, I was mentally ill. So everything that was coming out of, everything that I was writing, I look back on it just being like, wow, like you read something written by a mentally ill person and it's just like, this is terrible. Or you feel bad for the person. That's how I felt. And when I got into a better place, you go from being a victim and pitting yourself and just all these unattractive qualities and nonsensical work to being a person of abundance, of looseness, of creativity. Like play reactivates your creativity really well and gets you in a place where you see more possibilities rather than closed doors. You see a bunch of open windows. And so, and especially with improv, you know, you're practicing creating new things and discarding them right away, like not revisiting that thing. You're just like, what else? What else? What else?
No dwelling.
It's like, yeah, it's constant brainstorming. So, and when I shared my story on my site, you know, that went viral, and for years it was the top search result on Google for anxiety cure. And that was the other thing, Louise. It was funny because I've met all these people who work for these huge mental health organizations, right? And for years they were hitting the drum of, we got to end the stigma. We got to end the stigma. And I was like, that's nonsense. You don't need to end the stigma. You need to help people heal, because then they're not afraid to talk about it. After I got through it, I was like, oh, this is what happened to me. Here's what helped me. No big deal. I shared that on my blog like it was, I wasn't scared at all to share that story because I was no longer ashamed. It was like I had a cold and I got over it. You know, it was like that level of just matter of fact. And it, like for people who had anxiety, for a lot of them at that time, it blew their minds because there was nothing like that on the internet at the time that was published. And so because everything before that was very like a doctor said it, or it was very like the person was still struggling with it. And so there didn't just seem to be a lot of hope.
Yeah. And
it leveled me up in terms of my work. You asked about my work. It leveled up my level of vulnerability and openness and ability to connect with other people. And like that's a superpower to have, you know, to be able to be comfortable with another person's pain and to catch them rather than to be so focused on your own pain that you can't help them.
Right.
You know?
You're just in a tunnel vision of your own life and you can't see broader or wider.
You can't make the impact that you want to make.
Yeah.
You can't have the relationships that you want to have. If you're stuck with anxiety, you are setting yourself up, obviously, for future health problems, but you're incapable of forming meaningful relationships. I remember going on a date with this amazing gal in San Francisco when I was still struggling with anxiety. And I remember thinking, as I was sitting there, I'm so disappointed that I'm experiencing this. I know she doesn't like me because of who I am right now. I'm super serious and like, and when she read an early draft of my book, she said, you know, like when we went on that date, I was not into you. I thought like there was something wrong with you. It turns out there was. And like, just think about that. If you're listening to this, how many opportunities you are missing because you're stuck, and how important it is to get out and what you could contribute both to other people and yourself if you got out.
Mm-hmm. You're not expressing your true essence if you are in that anxiety-ridden place, and play gets us out of that.
Very easily, too.
Absolutely. For those people that say, I don't even know what play means anymore and what play would look like for me, what are some practical ideas that you could share around figuring that out for yourself?
Yes. So my favorite exercise is really what I stole from Stuart Brown, is the play history exercise, where you sit down with a piece of paper and just write out memories from your childhood of you experiencing joy, fun. No one was grading you. No one was forcing you. No one was judging you. Like, you were doing it because that was who you were and what type of person you wanted to be, or what activities you enjoyed. It was purely about fun and joy. And so again, it's totally different for everybody. So if you listen to this and you're like, I'm going to go sign up for improv, hold on, take the time to do this exercise. It takes like 10 minutes. You can even call up childhood friends or your family or whatever and ask them, because they'll have memories of you. Like one of my friends said, oh, dude, you just pulled pranks all the time. Like that's, it's like, my God, I did. I was a practical joker. I did that a lot. And so it just reintroducing like little things into my life that were just experiments. Like I'll never forget this one moment. I was at Whole Foods and the cashier, I was checking out, the cashier asked for my credit card and I just reached out to give her the credit card. And when she reached to grab it, I just pulled it away from her. And like, it was that little moment that, like, not only did she, smile and kind of, it was just like a little playful exchange. I gave her the credit card, but it was that I was like, I remember who I am, deep down, and it allowed me to be that person more. And the more I became that person, I wasn't being childish, I was being childlike again. It was all of a sudden the world became open to me again. Like people responded with different energy, because you fall in love with people who are happy. We can't help ourselves. Like the people who are really happy, we can't help but love, because it's contagious. They make us happy. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a world full of anxious people, no one loves each other. So
that sounds like a nightmare.
Right. But that's what it is. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so you need to play because you need love in your life. And the only way people are going to love you is if you remain playful. And in fact, evolutionary psychologists have shown top 3 most attractive traits to both genders, playful. And so I'm sure you've heard your friends, or maybe even you've said, Louise, like, I love a man who's funny. Mm-hmm. No, you don't. You love a man who's playful, because playfulness is a unfakeable signal on a biological level that man is safe, and he's safe to be around your kids. Playful is safe. It is a display that you cannot fake of mental health.
Wow, I love that. Playfulness and mental health, they coincide with each other.
Hand in hand.
Yes. Really take that time to figure out what your play history is. And I think if some people are maybe even that blocked, like just try different things. Try a class here, try play a game here, just experiment.
Well, what is it for you, Louise? Like what did you do growing up?
So many. I was a performer at heart, so I loved to sing and dance. And my best friend and I spent probably, 100 hours learning Jennifer Lopez's dance performance to the American Music Awards back in like 2005 or something, and we performed it for the talent show. And that was just us rewinding and watching the moves and mimicking them. And I'd never taken a dance class in my life. But I'd gotten to the point where I was 22 and I thought, well, I've never taken a dance class before and I'm too old to even try at this point. And I almost didn't. And I realized I'm glad I snapped out of it, but hip hop dance is a big part of my life now because I decided that it was important for me to engage in that part of myself. I started taking ukulele classes so that I could learn how to accompany myself singing a couple years ago. So music and performance and that side of things really engages my playful side.
Good.
Sure.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Usually when I ask people that, they're like, yeah, I haven't done that thing in years, but you're doing it. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I have tendencies of, oh, should I be spending my time on this? But it's a practice. It's just like anything else, right?
Yeah.
So I practice it.
Yeah. And if nothing else, like a lot of people have tried meditation and they're like, oh, I can't do it. And they feel guilty about it. I get that. Like think of this as an alternative to meditation. Like, it is an active meditation. Meditation, the whole point is to calm your nervous system and be in the present. It's just you're regulating your breathing, and it sends a signal to your body that, hey, everything's cool. There's nothing to do, nowhere to be. Like, and you calm down and you feel great. Meditation's hard for people. So do a form of play, maybe play a sport or something, or dance or whatever, and you can have the same or very similar benefits that you're seeking that you would get from meditation or yoga.
Yep. Meditation is very hard for me. I'm so hyper. Does not feel natural to me. But yeah, figure out what it is that gets you into that flow state, that present state. And for me, a dance class, I can't be thinking about anything else. I have to be totally present with my body. And that's what does it for me. But it might be something different for you. And take the time to figure out what that is. All right. Any fun projects that you are working on right now? You have your books that you've written and the work that you do, obviously, but anything fun that you would like to share with everyone?
I'm in the process of planning a workshop where it's like primarily for people who are these type A driven, successful people who know they're at the breaking point. I haven't put together all the logistics. That's actually what I'm doing this week and next. But it will likely be end of January, and a day or two where there's play, but there's also like talk around processing the emotional component. Like, because otherwise you're stuck. It's these old feelings or these things that registered as traumas that you weren't even aware registered as traumas. Like, you kind of stay frozen in place. Mm-hmm. And so it's both about getting unstuck and adding that joy and fun back into your life and helping you realize a higher potential. So that's what I'm working on now. And we'll see how it goes.
That's amazing. How can people find out more about it or learn more if they have questions?
If they have questions, go to charliehoehn.com and shoot me an email.
Great. Okay. We'll definitely send them there. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. We're a couple minutes over time, and I appreciate you giving your time and being so generous with everything that you shared. I really appreciate it. That was great.
My pleasure. It was a great interview.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That was Charlie Hoehn, author of Play It Away and Play for a Living, talking about how he cured himself of anxiety, much of which was brought on by workaholism and just this immense pressure that he had put on himself to succeed. And he cured it with play. When I was listening back to our conversation, I definitely got flashbacks to the time when I got burnt out and came down with a bunch of anxiety and quit everything. This happened about 5 years ago. I was at a crossroads in my career and felt completely lost. I felt like what I was doing with my life wasn't aligned with who I was. I was working with some clients that had just taken it out of me, and I just felt completely drained. And I completely quit my life for a year. I floundered around until I found my way, and eventually I did. But man, I wish I would have had Charlie's book back then. So if you feel yourself burning out, and if you feel you can relate to Charlie's story at all about burning out from workaholism, anxiety, I highly recommend that you grab his book and that you will try play to help cure whatever it is that you're going through. Let's get into those nuggets of wisdom that we discovered during our conversation. Number 1, where are your intentions when it comes to work? So I live in a city that is very much all about working as hard as you can, and there's a certain image that comes with success. I live in San Francisco, a great city, and I love it here. But there is definitely this idea that you have to keep up with the Joneses and that you have to work to keep up with some sort of image of success here, and that can be hard. Charlie himself experienced it when he was living in San Francisco, and sometimes while it's great to love your work and it's great to work a lot, you have to ask ask yourself sometimes, where is this coming from? Am I doing this so that I can portray a certain image of success? Am I working this much because I'm supposed to? Do I have a boss that's breathing down my neck? What is the intention? Really stop and ask yourself, is it worth it that I'm working to this degree? And if you really love what you're doing, and if you have a good balance with your life, if you feel like you have agency in how you can spend your time, that's great. But if not, take a step back and ask yourself, what is the purpose of this? What is my goal of working this much? I know for me, I've had to step back so many times to ask myself, what is my version of success? What is my version of happiness? And that means having a certain amount of work-life balance. It means that I have my own business where I can make the calls around how I spend my time, the types of clients I work with, and how I choose to spend my time on a day-to-day. So that might not be for you, but maybe you're looking for a different kind of life balance that your current job doesn't give you. And maybe you are not playing enough in your day-to-day because work is not allowing for it. So really step back and ask yourself, what is my intention in my work? Number 2, be conscious in your decisions on how you spend your time. We often spend way too much time on things that are externally focused or passive, and not enough time on something that is internally focused. So anything that is externally focused is anything where there is an external obligation or validation. So that could be work, paying your bills, something that you have been assigned to do, that you're obligated to do, something that will give you external validation if you do it. Passive is what you do when you are zoning out and when you are just not engaging with anything actively. This could be scrolling through Instagram. This could be watching something on Hulu, YouTube, and not really engaging with it. But then internally focused. Those are the things we did when we were a kid. Those are the things we did because we loved to do it and because it's interesting to us and because we don't need anyone telling us to do it. Those are the things that you do to keep from burning out from the externally focused things. So be conscious in how you are spending your time. Could you shift the balance around so that you are spending more time on internally focused things and less time on that passive scrolling through Instagram? There's a place and time for everything, but maybe shift some of that time around and see how you feel. Regardless of what you do, just be very conscious of how and why you are spending your time. Number 3, the answer is always play. That might sound like a bold thing to say. In Charlie's example, he tried everything under the sun to cure his anxiety. He tried psychedelics before it was cool. He took a course, he tried meditation, he joined groups, he did everything. And the only thing that worked for him was play. It was so simple, but it's the only thing that worked. And when you think about it, play works 100% of the time in every situation. There's never a situation that play can't help make a situation better. It really doesn't. I dare you to try and find something. And I don't think you will. Whether that's relationships, work, education, play, when done for its intended purpose, always works. And I just challenge you, when you feel stuck in any capacity, think about how you can make play the solution. All right, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Recess Life podcast. Like I said, I encourage you to check out Charlie's book if you are dealing with anxiety or anything of the sort. You can find his book, Play It Away, and Play for a Living on Amazon. And you can also find out more about Charlie at charliehoehn.com. I'll link to both his books and his website on the show notes at therecesslife.com. Thanks for joining, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Are you looking for more play in your life? Make sure you're subscribed to the Recess Life podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or any of the podcast platforms. You can also find the video interviews on YouTube. Don't forget to leave a review. Your feedback is so important to me, and it helps others to find the podcast. You can also follow the conversation on Instagram at The Recessed Life. And lastly, you can go to therecesslife.com where you'll find all the episodes and show notes on each of our guests. I hope this podcast helps you to become a little more playful today than you were yesterday. Until next time, don't forget to get out and play today.